This is a quiet group. And still I can't get your attention. My name is Richard Potter. I'm Director of the Office of Corporate Engagement for Kansas State University. I want to welcome you here to our kickoff luncheon for the Working with Industry Boot Camp. And really appreciate you making time to be here. This is being video streamed live, so I want to say hello to the folks who are viewing online from Olathe and Salina and some of our extension offices and wherever else you might be. Today we're going to hear from Tony Bonconfuso, who is Executive Director of the University Industry Demonstration Partnership. And then Tony will be moderating a panel, the group here, and we'll be talking a little bit about what is in the alphabet soup that makes up corporate relations here at Kansas State. But first, I do want to give a brief introduction to Tony. He is the Executive Director of the National Academy's University Industry Demonstration Partnership, which is a membership organization and do tank as opposed to think tank. UIDP is a do tank comprised of leading innovation companies and research universities, including Kansas State University. And their focus is on improving collaboration between the corporate and in recognition of his experience and insights in this arena, Tony is regularly sought after as a speaker, both domestically and internationally, and today here at K-State. And he's published several reference resources as well. Tony's been in his current position since 2007. Prior to that, he spent 12 years at the University of South Carolina as Director of Research and Economic Development, and then later as Senior Director of Strategic Alliances for the College of Engineering and Computing. Among his specialties, Tony lists open innovation, university industry research partnerships, university research administration, science policy, and technology transfer. He holds a PhD in inorganic chemistry from the University of South Carolina and earned his BS in chemistry and political science from Furman University. He also serves as a consultant for government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and private firms, and is the vice chair on the MedStar Health Research Institute. So please join me in welcoming Tony Bonconfuso to Kansas State University.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Okay. Well, it certainly is an honor to be here with you all in Manhattan today. I had a little bit of a challenge getting here, but we're here now, so hopefully I'll be able to inform and entertain and maybe learn something from you all today. I always like going to different places. I always learn something new. It's also great seeing all this purple. I'm a Furman alum, and for those of you who know the Purple Paladins, so I don't get to see purple too often, so this is a little bit of a treat. I also want to thank your team here, Paul Lowe and Katie Smalls and Richard and everybody else for inviting me to come spend the day. I do feel a little bit like an opening act. I know Connie Armentrout, my good friend from Monsanto, is coming in a few weeks, and so she's the headline act. I'm just the opening act. But hopefully I'll be able to share some insights with you during this afternoon and talk to you all about what's going on from my personal perspectives at the university industry interface. So I put together a slide deck to talk to you a little bit about the UIDP. As Richard mentioned, Kansas State is a member of the UIDP, and it's an institutional membership, which means all of you can participate in our activities. And so I'm very proud of our work. I think we do great work because we have content experts participate in our activities from our member organizations. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the UIDP now. This is a little bit of an infomercial. And then we're going to have a panel later on, and then I'm going to give a presentation on general activities around university industry collaborations. Okay, so I like to start with this side just to talk about the difference of cultures between universities and companies. And you all know this. Can you all see that okay? That green doesn't probably show up all that well. So, you know, this is a classic issue that you hear when you talk to folks from industry and universities when they have challenges, right? Universities are in the business of educating, doing research, and advancing the public good. Companies are in the business of making money. Now, there are some of these newfangled companies that will devote some of their funds to bright social good or whatever. That's the exception rather than the rule, because if they don't make $1 of profit, they don't have any percentage to give to somebody else. So companies are in the business of making money, and they want to expand the state of the art. So they have a little different mission than what you do as a university. And then the question is, where can you come together to find a place where you can work and there's some commonality? And by the way, all these slides will be given to you all to have later on. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about the UIDP. We are a membership organization, as Richard mentioned. We are comprised of the sector leaders from industry. So Pepsi is one of our members. Monsanto is one of our members. IBM, Intel, Siemens, Boeing, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of our members later. And then the university space, we represent the broad sector of university. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. We were founded and created to provide a forum for company and university representatives to get together and talk about issues affecting collaborations. So one of the benefits of my job is I get to attend a lot of meetings where these kind of issues are discussed, and I'm very interested in these issues. And I'll go to a university meeting like APLU, right? And everybody know what APLU is? It's the old nostalgic, right? The Land Grant Association. And the research officers will get together and they'll complain about working with companies. And then I'll go to a company meeting like IRI, the Industrial Research Institute, and they'll complain about working with universities. And I'll say, well, but the problem is there's nobody here from the other side to talk to you about those problems. So the UIDP was created to provide a forum for companies and universities to get together and talk about issues affecting collaborations. So we started in December 2006. We've been around since then. I think Paul's been your representative since the get-go. But any of you can participate in our activities. And so one of the things that Paul and his team have done is they put together this book for you, a resource book that has a lot of UIDP materials. And I'll talk about some of those later this morning. But those materials are things that you can use as a resource for you as you think about collaborating with industry. All right, so as I mentioned, and if you notice, K-State's the biggest, right? We have 128 members today. We represent a broad swath of universities and companies, as I mentioned. Because we're not focusing on specific technical issues, we have competitors in the room that get together and talk. And if you ever attend a UIDP meeting, and once again, all of you can attend a UIDP meeting if you wish, they're very intimate. They're small gatherings of a couple hundred people, and people get to talk and know each other. So one of the secret sauces to our activity is it's like corporate team building exercises, right? So it's getting people from companies and universities together to work on problems, not around a specific contract, but just around some specific issues affecting collaborations in general. And so this is just a representative list. If you want the complete list, you can go to our website. It constantly changes, but we represent schools with medical centers, some that don't. We represent land grants. We represent private schools, Ivies, regional state schools we have a set of. And on the company side, like I said, we really represent a broad swath of companies. All right, so what do we do? What's the secret sauce to what we do and how we got started? Well, we were founded really as a result of discussions that took place dating back over a decade ago when company leaders and university leaders, so the presidents of universities, the CTOs of companies got together and talked about the fact that universities and companies really need to work better together to help us with competitiveness. So there was something called the Gathering Storm Report. Have you all ever seen that? Anybody seen the Gathering Storm Report? It was put up by the National Academies in, I think it was 2005. And in that, it basically said that the U.S., one of the last bastions of greatness for the U.S. in terms of activities was commercialization and technology. And that if we wanted to maintain our edge, we needed to do some things differently. A man by the name of Norm Augustine, who had been the head of Martin Marietta, was one of the co-authors of that book. And he talked about it being the proverbial frog in the pot of water. And the water was getting warmer. And we needed to do some things to ensure that we kept our edge, that we didn't offshore, we offshored manufacturing, we lost out in a whole bunch of areas. But he thought research and development and technology broadly was an area that we still led the world in, but it was in danger of going away. And so in that report that came out, and that's publicly available from the National Academies Press, one of the recommendations called for the creation of a skunk works where companies and universities could get together and work on issues affecting collaborations. And that's what we do. So if you look in your booklet, and I should have brought up my binder that the research office has put together, you'll see a series of reports that we've created. We also do lots of other things like webinars and training sessions. In fact, Paul leads our educational program with Arturo Pisano from Siemens. Y'all can look at that if you want, and you can see some of the propaganda in there, as I like to say, some of our handouts. And so we are a forum where company and university representatives can get together, identify an issue, talk about them with people from across the sector, and then try to find solutions to those problems. So let me give you an example. Let's see, which one should I use? Maybe I'll use the Researcher Guidebook. So we hold our meetings around the country, and one of our meetings was at Georgia Tech, co-hosted by Georgia Tech and Kimberly-Clark. Kimberly-Clark is pretty close to Georgia Tech in Atlanta. We had an assistant professor and a bench scientist from Kimberly-Clark talk about their relationship and what were the challenges about working together. And so at the end of the discussion, I asked the question, what could we have done to help you get over some of these hurdles that you didn't know existed before you started working together? And I'll give you an example. The professor, the young professor who was untenured actually, said that he didn't actually believe that when the company said they wanted to have monthly calls, that they actually were going to have monthly calls, right? He thought, you know, government doesn't do that. I've been government funded. They ask for reports, and I don't have to worry about getting it in until when? When do you have to worry about getting the report into the government? Before you submit the next proposal, right? But Kimberly-Clark wouldn't pay them, wouldn't pay Georgia Tech until he met his milestone, which one of them had to do with a call, as an example. So there were things like that that he was unaware of. So we said, well, what could we do to help this young professor and this bench scientist from Kimberly-Clark, if they ever wanted to, if they met tomorrow, what could we do to help them better understand about working collaboratively? So we got together and we came up with this idea for a researcher guidebook, and I know that's in your booklet somewhere. Katie, would you mind pulling that out, and maybe I'll show that as an example. So we had, that report is available online. We had about 40 individuals from all over the country get together and participate in that activity in helping put together basically a guidebook to help active researchers understand what it's like to work at the university-industry interface. And so this is the big version. There's actually a small version that's like a blue cover in your guidebooks as well. That's kind of an executive summary. And that's an example. Paul's showing it off there. He's modeling it for you. But that's the example of the kind of work that we do. So if you're a researcher at the university here, and you're interested in working with industry, but you haven't really ever done that, I would encourage you to look at the Researcher Guidebook. So we created this booklet. We also have done a webinar series. We've also done workshops in this space, all kinds of things to help our member institutions do their work better. And that's what we do. I always like to say this, we eat what we kill. So as an organization, we send an invoice every year to our members. And they have to validate whether or not we're adding value by paying an invoice, right? So luckily, we have about a 96% return rate, so we must be doing something right. All right? So that's what we do. So people identify problems, and then we try to help solve those problems. Okay, what are the problems that we try to solve? And people always ask me, well, tell me, what is a UIDP project? Well, I kind of describe one for you. Our start was really around contracting. So for those of you who have ever tried to get an industry contract through not just your office here, because the office here is very fast, but dealing on the industry side, right? Getting an industry contract in place can take a really long time, okay? And so we got our start with one project looking at ways to solve the problems around contracting issues. So interestingly, at the same time, the Europeans were looking at this, and they came up with something called the Lambert Agreements. Has anybody heard of the Lambert Agreements? Okay. The Lambert Agreements were put together in Europe, led by GlaxoSmithKline in England, and they put together a big fat 3-ring binder of agreements that were model agreements that they said people should use without changes. That actually, we could have a long discussion about the Lambert agreements. That approach I don't think has been very successful. In the U.S., through the contract accords, we decided not to come up with standard agreements, but have people sit at the table and talk about the issues and how to tackle and address them. So we've created, through the contract accords, about 18 different terms that you typically find in industry contracts and talk about how to address those. So if you're a faculty member and you want to understand why is the research office having a hard time negotiating this issue around background intellectual property, and you want to understand a little bit more about it, the contract accords is a great way to start. So that's where we got our start. But we do a lot more than contracting now. As Richard indicated, we got our start in December 2006. I've been around since July 2007. We have expanded. We have about 20 projects right now. I'll tell you a little bit more about those. But we do projects around contracting. We do projects around compliance. So we've done projects around export control, conflict of interest. We've done projects in topical areas. So while we typically don't do projects in specific technology areas like food science or new materials, we do a few offerings there. We do some specialized workshops, and those have been successful. We play and do a little bit in the workforce development space. So companies want to work with you because they want to talk to your students and hire them. And so we do a little bit in the workforce space because candidly, students aren't well prepared for careers in industry, right? For those of you faculty members, you train them to be what? Faculty members most of the time, right? Not all of you, but most of you train them to be faculty members. And it's just not a sustainable model. And then lastly, we put things in the strategic engagement category, and that's where this falls. So we do projects anywhere at the university-industry interface. So one of the things, if nothing else, if you don't remember anything else I said today, 3 months from now, you were approached by a company about doing work with them, and you have a question about how to do it, or there's a thought that you have in mind, reach out, look at our website, find some information, ask Paul if we have done work in that space, and if we haven't, propose it as a problem that maybe we can tackle. Now, the only problem is if you volunteer an idea, what always happens? What was that? You end up on the committee. It's a working group. We don't call it a committee. I don't know why. We call them working groups. So, yeah, so you wind up on a working group, okay? But you and 25 of your closest friends from all over the world can work on those problems. Okay, so, like I said, we are not a talking group, as Richard said. A couple of you all gave me a little chuckle about this when I said this. We're a do tank. We do stuff. Okay, you come to one of our meetings. We have talks. We do lots of networking receptions, and we work on our projects. So, how do you do a project? Well, like in the case of the Researcher Guidebook, we identified a problem. We asked the UIDP community who's interested in working on it. So for that project, we actually had a couple of associate deans of research that were interested in working on that. We had a couple of faculty members who have never been involved in another UIDP project, and that's okay. So we raised a question. We said, okay, this is an idea that people from Georgia Tech and Kimberly-Clark have. Who else is interested in this? And people self-selected, and we got a working group of around 40 people. They identified what they wanted to do. We used something called the Hellmeyer Catechism. Anybody know what the Hellmeyer Catechism? Any of you military folks in here? Nobody? All right, George Hellmeyer was the director of DARPA. And he was the first director of DARPA. And when people came to him with ideas, he asked them to answer 7 questions. And so our project process involves 7 questions that we ask people to answer. What is it you want to do? Who cares if you're successful at it? How much is it going to cost? Is there something already done in that space? All right, so we ask people to fill out, tell us what it is you want to do, who would care if we do it, and what is going to be the impact of doing that. Then we form this work team, we put together a work scope, and we work on these projects. We produce something, and then we share that among the community. Okay? That's what we do. It's a pretty simple process, but it works pretty well for us. All right? And the secret sauce to what we do is the fact that you have people from companies and universities come together to do this. So there are a lot of great university groups out there. And there are a lot of really great company groups out there. We are a unique form. You are the only place that you're going to find where company and university representatives get together to talk about issues affecting research collaborations. All right, so here's a list of projects. I'm not going to go through this whole list. It's just an illustrative list. We talk about projects being in phases. Some are conceptual, some are under development, and some are underway. We also have projects that actually get completed. We actually finish projects. Visit them a few years later, but we're not like the government. We actually finish things. So I used to work for the government, so I can say that. All right, that was my one joke for the day. So, all right, so let me talk about major benefits of UIDP membership. Well, like I said, you get to share best practices and see what we do. We solve problems that you have. So people like our group because we actually solve things. It's a great networking forum. So we hold meetings and negotiate a deal with Lockheed Martin. You've never met them. We use email. And I'm just going to tell you this. Email is the worst thing that ever happened to university-industry collaborations. Just the worst thing that's ever happened. So you've been dealing with somebody by email for 2 years, and now you come to UIDP meeting and you actually get to meet them. And you learn something about their family and the fact that they like the Baltimore Orioles, or they like to knit, or they have 3 kids and the first kid went to Cornell or whatever, and you get to know something about them, right? So then when you go to negotiate with them, they're not a name block on an email. They're actually a person. So those are things that I think really bring value to what we do. And then last, we have this great reference resource guide of materials that you all can access as members. Because once again, you all are members through the membership that the university maintains. Okay, so this is just some testimonials from some of our folks. Like I said, we have a very high return rate in terms of membership, which means that we must be doing something right. So my offer to you is, our next meeting is at Purdue in April. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. Attend one of our meetings, join our listserv, get on our email list. I will tell you, we are very conservative about sending out messages to our listserv. We send out maybe 6 to 8 a month at most. We put a lot of stuff in a LinkedIn group. Join our LinkedIn group. We put a lot of information on there because you can regulate that. Okay, this is our next meeting. It's in March and April. My 20th wedding year anniversary. They planned this, they didn't consult me on the date, but it's going to be at Purdue. I did get married on April Fool's Day, for that's worth. But it's going to be at Purdue. There's going to be a pre-workshop before the general meeting on negotiating master agreements, and we'd love to have you all come if you'd like. So these are, like I said, we have a LinkedIn group. There's a general email address, and there's our website. And I think with that, I finished a few minutes early. I'll take any questions that you all might have before we invite up the panelists for the next session. So any questions? Any questions? Anything anybody want to say? Yes? Sometimes a report. Sometimes we do training sessions, and we consider that to be a product. We do webinars. We consider those to be products. We have different dissemination strategies. So typically, it's people coming together to work on something that's a challenge for them at the university-industry interface. So we're focused on things at the university-industry interface, anything in that space. And then the solution to that can be anything. So we have a lot of reports, but we do a lot of other things besides write reports.
So how do you measure success?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So the question is, how do you measure success for metrics? Sure. Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot about that. So the question was, how do you measure your success? Well, from a very guttural perspective, I measure our success by the fact that we're growing our membership, and we have 96% of our people re-up every year, which tells me that we must be adding value, right? Because there's a cost, not just in membership, but also time and energy to participate. That's not really the question you're answering, but that's a guttural response to whether or not we're being valued by our members. People have asked us, do you know of specific increases in industry volume that we have at a university because of membership? Or are there specific deals done? And so, I can point to specific agreements that came into place because of our activities at the UIDP. But those are more anecdotal, those are stories. So those are difficult to measure, you know what I mean? I just candid with you. We're struggling with that. We struggle with the metrics angle. We know people are doing deals that were not taking place prior to the UIDP's existence because they met somebody through that networking activities. So, candidly, and I'm going to talk about this if you come to my next session, right? A lot of people in this part of the country feel like they're a flyover place, right? That everybody wants to be either in San Francisco or in Boston. I don't know your background or your field of study, but let's say you're a chemist, and you want to get Werner Kaufman from BASF to come to Manhattan. He's not passing through Manhattan on the way to somewhere. He has to want to come here, right? So it's a challenge, I think, sometimes to get people to come to places without them having some knowledge or experience or some relationship with you. And so I think we know that that's taking place at our meetings. But in terms of qualitative or quantitative measures, I will tell you, we just don't have that. I would love to have those. It's very difficult to do. So that's a great question, though. Sir?
Yeah, I noticed that earlier in your talk, when you were talking about the companies, you said you had sector leaders.
Yes.
I didn't hear any sort of equivalent statement about the university. So my question is, when you said sector leaders, were you simply saying, we've got really great companies?
Yes, okay.
Or were you implying that there's some kind of selection process on the part of the membership side?
Okay, so the question was about our membership and who are our members. And so I can stand up here and tell you that we represent not just the best from the corporate sector, and we do represent the sector leaders. We don't have a lot of depth within each sector. We have a lot of depth in the chemistry sector and in the manufacturing. But on the university side, right now our membership is limited to U.S. universities. We have 70% of the AAU members, if that, as a metric for you. And out of the top 20 overall federal R&D, I think we have 16. So, I mean, we represent the best U.S. universities, but we also represent schools that are not in the top 100 or maybe even the top 300. We have some other schools.
I guess my real thrust was that on the corporate membership side, is it anybody can sign up that wants to?
Yeah, so the question is, are we exclusive? We do have a membership application process. There is a committee that reviews that. We are, I would say, mostly open. So the standard that we use to determine membership, there's a couple of criteria. One is you either have to be a research funder or a research performer. So we have a couple of national labs that are in our mix because national labs operate sometimes like a company, sometimes like a university. We have some hospitals that are in the mix in terms of membership. We don't have service providers, so we don't have law firms or like I used to work at PwC. PwC would not be eligible for membership. There are some companies that are based in foreign countries that I think we have lots and lots and lots of companies that are based overseas. Michelin, BASF, Samsung, IHI, which is a Japanese company. There are some countries I think we would take a real hard look at. So if we got some applications from companies that were in countries that we didn't feel it could add to the activities of what we do. We don't need more members to come and to pay dues. We need more members who can add to the knowledge that we have in terms of working on the activities that we do. So for example, we have an international contracting project, and if you can bring additional perspective on that, then that's great. Okay, one more question, and then I want to bring up the panel. Yes, sir.
You remarked that email was the worst thing to ever happen to industry, university collaborations. So before the dawn of email, what did those collaborations look like?
So I actually did not pay him, but that's a great question, and I'll follow up in my next talk. But the question was about email and why it's not good for university industry collaborations and what did we do in the past. What we used to do in the past is we actually used to fly to people and sit down with them. What a concept, right? So I'll tell you a very, very quick story. I used to be at the University of South Carolina, where Frank Martin is, right? Frank's still colorful. He's still, wow. We hired a professor from Seagate. I asked him when he came on board, because I contributed to his startup package, so I got to meet with him. And I said, well, what about your research at Seagate? And he goes, well, I was really the only person doing that kind of work. And they don't really have anybody else to do it. I said, well, do you think they'd be willing to sponsor some work when you come to the University of South Carolina? So I called them, and I flew in the night before, and we actually had dinner. And the next day, I said, I have signatory authority for the university. I will stay until we work out a statement of work and I can sign off on an agreement. And we did. Right? Now, in today's world, what would we do? He would have given me the email address for Jim Williams at Seagate. I would have sent Jim an email. Jim would have said, okay, well, here's our standard agreement that I got from my attorney. Right? It would have gone. Paul would have shared it with whomever Paul shares it with in your space. Marked it up, redlined it, sent it back. Then the head of the department would have seen it. Then it would have gone to their attorney. And then it would have been sent back. And that process can take literally months. And so that's what email is great once you have a relationship. It's a terrible way to start a relationship. Okay, so with that, please, let's call up the 1 o'clock panel. Okay. Sorry, one minute late. Since y'all are talking.
Okay, well, let's do quick introductions down the line, and then we'll start with, Paul, you're first on the list to make some opening comments. Again, I'm Richard Potter, Director of the Office of Corporate Engagement for K-State.
Good afternoon. I'm Mitzi Richards, Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations at the Kansas State University Foundation.
Paul Lowe, Assistant Vice President for Research, direct the Pre-Award Services Unit on campus. We'll throw out an acronym, PAS. So we'll get it started.
I'm Teresa Landis. I'm the Business Manager for the Research Foundation, and our acronym is KSURF, K-S-U-R-F.
I'm Ken Williams. I'm the Director of Licensing with the Kansas State University Institute for Commercialization. Our acronym is KSU-IC or IC or several other things that Paul calls us from time to time.
Okay, I was asked to give a brief summary regarding the support services provided by Pre-Award Services for your industry collaborations. When I was asked to do this, they capitalized brief and underlined it. They didn't know me very well, so I will try my best to speed it along. But for those that aren't familiar with our office, we are called Pre-Award Services, sometimes referred to as PAS or Pre-Awards. We are a unit of ORSP. So I love acronyms. The Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. ORSP is managed by Dr. James Geikema, the Associate Vice President for Research. Now, within ORSP, you're going to find services for multidisciplinary team building. They can help you look for K-State team members outside of your discipline. They can help organize and help you find, search for leveraging funds maybe from the federal government to help leverage the support that you're contemplating with your industry partner. It's important to know also that ORSP manages the University Seed Grant Program, the FDA, USRG, just to throw some more acronyms. So we have the Faculty Development Awards and the University Small Research Grants, which can provide some travel funds to meet with collaborators or grants available for that. So all of our offices report to the Vice President for Research. So basically what we do in pre-awards is to really provide services in support of your RSCAD activities. Show of hands, how many know what RSCAD means? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I see a couple of you from the remote locations knew as well. But the research, scholarly, and creative activities and discovery are, is that part of your scholarship that's one part of your scholarship that's supported by the offices of the Vice President for Research. as you pursue your collaborations with industry, contacting the Office of Pre-Award Services early on in the process is very important. We actually, I don't like to go into the policy standpoint, but the policies of the university say that we're to review and approve all your submissions that are going outside to outside entities for sponsored project support. It's really mine that out of the depths of the policy statement, but we look at it as a more positive thing. We want to help make that presentation to the your industry collaborators, just top off your competitors. We want to make sure it's the best presentation. There's a lot of issues that give industry collaborators some angst. And so we have strategies, F&A, we're going to talk about facilities and administrative cost in later boot camps, but that conversation, I've been in this business for 27 years, and F&A just does not go away. That conversation will not go away. I did a presentation for UIDP with industry co-presenters and a Council on Governmental Relations, and we called that demystifying, what F&A is all about. So we can give you some budget strategies on how to present, the cost of your proposed program to the industry that makes it more palatable to them. We've had major companies that collaborate with the university goes, look, I get the F&A thing. I understand it, but I just don't want to see it in a budget you present to me. I get I need to pay the full cost. I'm willing to do that. Just, fully burden your cost so we don't see that. And so that's one strategy. And another is we have these same companies telling us, look, if I agree to pay full overhead, I don't want you to let another company come in and bully you to paying less than full. That means I'm subsidizing my competitors' activities. We have a question. Yeah. Which one did I not cover? Okay. Yeah, okay. Well, this is acronym soup, so you need to call me immediately. If I don't define a acronym, just let me know. Right now, we're talking about F&A, or facilities and administrative cost. And so those are some of the services we can provide up front and strategies when you're developing your cost programs. In the depths of the policy statements, there is a statement that says that we should not be sending cost estimates out to external parties unless they've been reviewed and approved centrally to make sure there is a capture of the full cost. The Board of Regents require that we pursue break-even costing. We don't realize a profit, but we've got to make sure we cover our costs. We have a whole office full of proposal development specialists, contract negotiators, budget analysts, and so we're all prepared to assist in these. They're very familiar with everything that needs to be done to approach industry collaborations. There's a lot of agreements where you're trying to be flexible and nimble, moving with the speed of light with your industry collaborator, but they'll want you to sign I can't talk with you, I need you to sign this CDA. And that's a confidentiality agreement that they executed before we can start discussions. We really need to see those. We will negotiate terms that are compatible with a continued collaboration and preserve your scholarship. So a lot of negotiations. We'll negotiate publication rights for you. A lot of issues pop up in the agreements regarding liability, indemnification, and insurance. Most of the time, our negotiations aren't, well, they're not for the faint of heart, but they're really not K-State assuming a preferred negotiation position. They're really educating our potential industry collaborators on how we need to conduct our collaborations to satisfy the myriad of public policy mandates. So we have compared to an industry negotiator, we have what we're doing is just defending the public trust. And so, we get on the soapbox, and all we have to do is say, well, this isn't a preferred negotiation stance. We're just trying to make sure the agreement can be executed in accordance with the statutes that govern us. So it's kind of hard to negotiate against that, really. In pre-awards, we have to deal with export control issues. If you're dealing with a foreign company or a foreign entity and have export control issues, we're going to help you with that. Subcontracting, or those subcontracts are issued out of our office. And also, we do some what's called non-pre-awards, or non-financial, they're called non-financial post-award activities. So if you ever need changes to your contract, modifications later on, we will help you with that. And before I close, I want to mention that, I was asked to talk about pre-award services and the services and support we provide in your pursuit of industry engagement. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the university-wide support that exists on campus within your department, within your colleges. You know who you are, you know who they are. And I just want to say, without them working with us as a team, it'd be kind of hard to pull this off. When we started pre-award services, the university graph showed between $30 and $40 million of external funding. Our biggest year was $152 million. And back in the early beginnings, I was at a major university. We're not silos of separate entities. But I think we can pull this off. We're excited to dig deeper into these issues as the boot camp proceeds. So I hope you'll join us this afternoon. We're going to have a great panel, faculty panel of your peers, and Tony's going to dig deep into an environmental scan of what's going on out there. So with that, I'll stop.
Before Teresa starts, I do want to mention that in the back of your binder, there is a resource or a contacts tab. Rebecca, is that what it's called? Contacts? And Paul's contact information is on that page. Everybody on this panel, with the exception of Tony, I think we did not put his contact information in there, but it's on his slide. And so as you have questions and you want to reach out to us, be sure to hang on to that binder and the contact information there. Teresa, take it away.
All right, thank you, Richard. As I said, I'm Teresa Landis, and I'm the business manager at the Research Foundation. I have been at the Research Foundation for, I think, going on about 22 years. And the head of the Research Foundation, we actually have a president. We're a nonprofit 501c3 corporation, so we are set up outside of the university, and we are governed by a board of directors. About half of them are university employees, faculty, deans, appointments. The other half are outside directors. Our president is Dr. Geikema, and so you're going to see some overlap in the offices here. And as Paul said, we work in a continuum. So, things start in your labs, in the research centers. You do proposals, inventions come about, and that's when you come to us. So one other thing I want to let you know is that we are a self-funded organization. We do not receive any budget from the university, and so we exist on the successful licensing that we do of our inventions. So the main thing that we do is manage intellectual property. And there are a number of things that fall under intellectual property. The main one that we usually do is patents. But in addition to patents, we also work with copyrights, trademarks, plant variety protection certificates, biological materials, and also trade secrets. Whenever we do patents, we rely on outside patent counsel. Some research foundations or tech transfer offices have internal patent counsel that will do their filings, but we engage outside counsel. And we work with them. They file and they prosecute our applications. We work through them to coordinate communication back to our inventors and then also to licensees if we have an agreement in place on a particular technology. We work with the Institute for Commercialization. They are contracted to be our marketing arm, and they also negotiate agreements on our behalf. But when we are getting patent protection, we seek to ensure that we are protecting the most commercially applicable part of the invention. And if I didn't say it before, you know, we are here to benefit you, and we want to do the best that we can by the innovations that you come to us, you bring to us, and so we do all we can to extract value out of that. I do want to, I want to give you a little more information about patent prosecution. After we file an application, the prosecution usually starts about 1.5 to 2 years after the application is filed. You can take between 2 and 6 years once you start with a patent application until you get to issuance. The life of a patent is generally 20 years from the first filing, so this is a long endeavor. So this is definitely something that we look at as a partnership with you when you bring things to us. Patents are expensive, so we rely on the Institute for Commercialization to aggressively market our technologies. During the first 12 to 18 months is really when we hit it the hardest, and hopefully we will have a partner in place before we have to go into individual countries to do international filings, because the costs on those can ramp up very quickly. And without a partner, the Research Foundation just does not have the means to be able to support those on our own. The role that you play in all this, you are the expert. You're the researcher, you know what's going on in your field. You're the one that keeps excellent records of what it is that you are doing. We will ask you to get involved in prior art searches. We ask that you make us aware of the landscape where your invention fits into the art. And this helps on both the patenting side to make sure that we're covering what needs to be protected, and also on the marketing side so that it is being marketed appropriately. Your ongoing cooperation and input is essential, because the Patent Office will raise objections to the claims that go into the patent application, and you may be asked to do experiments or provide declarations of your work to overcome the objections. And so your role is very essential to what it is that we do with your innovations. And the IC, as Ken will talk about next, they are going to look to you for marketing leads. They'll have you review marketing material and also meet with potential licensees to discuss the science of your invention. I might mention in the workbook, or in the book here that we have, under the lunch tab, there's a list of our 2014 activity, and look through that and see if you see names of people who are in your departments or in your college that we have worked with. Those are folks that have brought things to us. We had 14 issued patents in 2014, which is really a record for us. That's a good number. But those are people that we partner with at the university level, and they can direct you to us. They can let you know how we work with them. And another section that we have in this book is an intellectual property handbook that's put together that really kind of lays out the nuts and the bolts of what we do. Some reasons why you should get involved, to begin with, there are contractual obligations in place. Following up to what Paul said on the agreement side of it for sponsored projects, within those agreements, there are requirements to report inventions to the funding agency or to the corporate sponsor. You also have an obligation under the Board of Regents intellectual property policy and the K-State intellectual property policy to disclose your inventions to us. And we also have a responsibility to student inventors that are involved in discovery. Aside from that, whenever we have licensing revenue, we do return a portion of that to the inventors and also to your departments. Bringing your inventions to us, sometimes these, and the workforce issue comes in where maybe the students can be hired by the companies that research funding is done through. So that's all I have to share. I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, I'm Ken Williams. I'm the Director of Licensing at KSUIC. And I didn't hit the Powerball last night, so I'm glad to still have that job. But really, I think the focus of kind of the panel today was to give you a high-level overview of who we are and what we do. All of us will be speaking in several different sessions throughout this series, so I'll try to get into some more detail later on. But really, when you look at the Institute for Commercialization, I think first off, as just a point of general logistics, our organization is located in the Manhattan Kansas State University Innovation Center in the K-State Research Park, just off of North Manhattan Avenue. We're co-located along with the Research Foundation and the Center for Corporate Engagement, as well as we operate a business incubator in the facility. So just if you haven't met with us or haven't been involved with us, that's where we're at, just from a logistical standpoint. Really, when you look at the goal of our organization, we're established to really help further the mission of the university as directed by our board of directors and university administrative staff. We are a 501c3 operation similar to the Research Foundation, so we do report to that board. And really, a lot of the activity that we conduct, as Teresa said, happens under a contract with the KSU Research Foundation. You know, really, we have a particular focus in our operation on identifying opportunities and facilitating the transfer of intellectual property out of the university and trying to get that into commercial hands so they can, you know, build a product, so there's public utilization. And then we're also trying to develop revenue streams that can come back to the university and the Research Foundation to help further our mission as well. I think with that, I wanted to try to provide a very general overview of kind of how the process works and where we fit into the process and how we collaborate with the group here. But if you look at kind of the whole process of innovation through commercialization, really it begins with the researchers, and then developing relationships with industry or other sponsoring agencies. They find that there's something unique that they can do together that can benefit both parties. If they come to that agreement and find that there is a unique need for them to work together, then it really gets turned over to Paul's office so they can help, you know, turn that relationship into a contractual arrangement, which kind of guides the expectations of that relationship. Once you go through and do that work after you've put together that contract, if something comes out of that that's valuable, intellectual property that's monetizable, as Teresa said, you know, their organization secures the intellectual property and makes sure that there's something tangible that can be marketed. And then after that point, it's really that's the point where we engage, our staff engages, to first off, if it's a sponsored project where the sponsor has rights to the intellectual property, we will immediately start negotiating with that group, work out an arrangement, an agreement, licensing arrangement for that intellectual property. However, if it was funded by a group that doesn't retain the rights, or, you know, federal agency that allows us to maintain the rights, or a sponsor waives their rights, then really our team tries to go out and market the technology broadly to industry. And we'll get into a lot more detail on how that works in, I think, the final session of this series. But really, you know, again, high-level overview of that. What we'll do is we'll put together a fairly simple, non-confidential technology licensing profile. So TLP is an acronym you'll hear. And really what that does is that gives us an opportunity to go out and approach industry with what the general vision of the technology is. We work with our researchers to develop that document to make sure it's technically accurate. Our subject matter experts in a lot of the things we deal with. That's a great thing about working at a land-grant institution. There's a lot of variety of things that get developed and that we get to work with, but we're not subject matter experts. So we do work with our faculty to make sure that those marketing materials are accurate, technically accurate. Once we have that put together, our team will go out and approach anywhere from 10 to 20 companies that have an interest in this space. Some of those contacts come from our inventors, and we always appreciate input from inventors on folks that they think might be interested in the technology. And then some of them will come from our Rolodex, from folks we've already worked with. But frankly, a lot of those contacts are us mining cold contacts and finding a way into these companies and trying to find somebody that will be interested in the technology. So once we go through that marketing process, hopefully we find folks that are interested in the innovation, and they will then want to set up a technical discussion and we help facilitate that discussion so our inventors and their technical folks can work together, determine if it's a technically feasible arrangement for the university and the company. If so, and they're still interested, then we'll help negotiate the terms of that agreement, as Teresa mentioned earlier, and then hopefully reduce that to some kind of intellectual property agreement, licensing agreement, option, other things, and those are things we'll talk about in depth later on. So that's, and then once that's done, of course, we return it to the Research Foundation so they can manage that 20-year period of receiving royalties and managing patents and doing those kind of things, as Teresa mentioned again earlier. With that said, I think, traditionally that whole system, the tech transfer system, is viewed of as kind of a one-way street, a pipe flowing out of the house, really. Things are invented here, and then it's really a push mentality to try to fit them into corporate needs. I think what I would like to address in this series and discuss a little bit is the fact that what we found is that can actually be more of a two-way street, a conduit of information transfer back and forth that can not only lead to licensing of the technology, which is something that we want to do, but to be quite honest with you, the majority of the innovations that come out of universities don't get licensed. I think it's about 12 to 15% that do on average. But going through this process and engaging in this process, I think can offer a lot of opportunities for you to connect with industry. And so if they don't license the technology, well, maybe they're wanting to sponsor research in your lab for something else. Maybe they want to hire a grad student. Maybe they want to license the technology and hire a student. We've seen all those things happen. So I really want to try to dive into kind of that back and forth that we see as we move through this series. So that's kind of high level. One last thing while I have the mic here real quick. Also wanted to introduce another member of our staff. Rebecca Robinson is here. She's helped us put together this series. Rebecca is part of our staff, but her time is actually contracted out pretty much exclusively to the Knowledge-Based Economic Development Program, again, another acronym that I wanted to throw in while we're talking about the alphabet soup here. And really, that program is a really novel economic development program that's a partnership between the university, the city, the Chamber of Commerce, a lot of the organizations that are up here, some other regional economic development folks. And they're really focused on trying to identify companies they can bring in that want to co-locate near K-State. And that's great from an economic development standpoint, but it's also, I think, a great conduit, again, to encourage interaction with industry. So I just wanted to introduce Rebecca as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mitzi.
Thanks, Ken. I'm with the KSU Foundation. We usually don't go by KSUF, so I don't know why. That doesn't quite have a ring to it. In my role, I work very, very closely with my colleagues who work across the academy. We call it in their constituencies or their units or their programs. But my office specifically is the Office of Corporate Relations, so I work primarily in helping to facilitate relationships with companies where there is an across the academy strategy. It's a lot of words. What it really means is we build relationships with those companies who come to K-State for value, who recognize K-State for a myriad of things, but primarily at this point for our talent, for the talent we have on our faculty, and certainly for our graduates. So it's a very important role that oftentimes all of us team together to work together to help fill a company's need. I know since President Schultz came to K-State, we say K-State won a lot. And I think this group of individuals up here should demonstrate to you that that's really how we work. We call each other when we need inside a company. We call each other when we have struggles. And we work together, hopefully, to provide service for you all. Obviously, when I came, and I'm looking at Dr. Erickson here, because when I came to K-State in '98, I came as the leader for the advancement team for the College of Engineering. Primarily, my time was spent with alumni, developing relationships and really discovering their passions, and a lot with industry, too. So 7 years ago, when I moved into this role, I thought it was going to be really simple. It's not. it's very different than working with individuals. Companies come to the university because they want to develop the relationship, but really what they want to do is they want to find value. So we've all heard ROI, return on investment. That's why they come. And so for us, what we need to always think about is how are we presenting the best value for that relationship, and how are we going to continue to advance it? So my thought to you is always think about that relationship. Understand that no relationship is exclusive. All relationships need to be mined deep and wide, that we really can't think about, oh, well, that's a foundation relationship or an IC relationship or a KSU Research Foundation relationship. It's really a K-State relationship. And we have to think about that, and we have to recognize that whatever we individually can add to that brings value to that relationship. So what I do from time to time, and I look at my colleague Debbie Kirchhoff out there, I'm about next steps. I'm about the details. I'm about how do we move this relationship forward, how do we advance it, and how do we further it. So I look to my colleague Richard Potter, who says, give an example, Mitzi. and an example that comes to mind is our recent relationship that came when ConocoPhillips became ConocoPhillips and Phillips 66. We began to treat that relationship differently, obviously, because now we have two companies and not one, and that happens a lot in corporate relationships. They change a lot. So with the foundation, or I'm sorry, with Phillips 66 starting, we realized that it was going to be a broader than a philanthropic relationship because they were very interested in advancing a research relationship. So that is where we then go to Noel Schultz and her colleagues, who are really helping us identify where on the faculty can we mine for aligned goals. Lots of work there. I see the opportunity to build on what Carrie knows very, very closely, that the hundreds, literally, how many companies have been on our campus, Carrie, just this semester already?
Yesterday and the day before, 150.
Engineering company, or primarily here to mine for engineering talent. So to build on that relationship, we look to research to further that. Again, it's because philanthropic agendas, which is primarily why I am hired, really come at the end of that relationship. They will invest in the university around talent, but really where the relationship begins to mature and deepen is when there are research endeavors pursued as well. That is really where the ROI comes. So what I ask of you all is to really communicate and trust. I know that's sometimes a little hard when you have a relationship that you don't want anybody, and these are my words, geese up, but really communicate with your advancement teams. Talk to them about those relationships that you are beginning to mine. Tell them what is happening, and let them help you communicate with me, communicate across this table, to really build out a robust strategy to advance that relationship. How to do that? Talked a little bit about research. That's what the foundation is. One of the things the KSU Foundation can do for you is look to that company and help you mine that company for what I call champions. Many times that's our alumni. Many times we go to those alumni who we feel are well placed in the company, and we just ask. I mean, I'm all about sacraments. You know, will you be my champion? May I knight you? And use those individuals who do have a personal passion for the institution, want to see us do well, and get them involved. You can help us cultivate those relationships. Many times I've been in businesses where the first question I get asked is about a faculty member. That happens a lot because that's where our alumni have strong ties. Obviously, we're about solicitation. We're about asking that individual, that corporation, to invest in K-State's future. We want them to be a part of our success. So asking for those investments can come in lots of different ways. They can come to help students be successful, certainly help faculty make sure their research endeavor is successful, but more importantly, to make sure that there's an impact in a societal way. And once in a while, they're interested in that. That was my joke for the day, Tony. I think what I'll close with is about measuring results. Debbie, it's that next step kind of thing. We really do measure things at the foundation. We measure a lot, don't we, Chris? Metrics are about dollars raised. They're about what comes into the university that will help advance the relationship. And those include, not just in my office, not just philanthropic dollars, but I also count the relationships that I'm involved in with Mary Lou, things that that Paul helps with, so that we can understand that those things are valuable to us as well. Certainly, the increase in the number of frequencies that happen in the relationship building. How many times are we in those offices? Do companies come to our campus? How often do our faculty members engage with company leaders? And over time, really, the amount of truly philanthropic support a university receives from a company will depend in part on the number and the quality of non-philanthropic engagements, all of us. Ta-da.
Thank you, Mitzi. So yes, the metrics that Mitzi was talking about, the CDAs, confidentiality disclosure agreements that Paul was talking about, interactions with Institute for Commercialization and KSERF or the Research Foundation, all of those things, and then I should mention too, career and employment services and other aspects. They're collecting data, the foundation are collecting data on their corporate relationships, and up to this point, those databases really haven't been connected. So what I want to talk about is who's keeping track of this alphabet soup, who's keeping track of everything that is going on. And in fact, one of the key activities in the corporate engagement strategic plan is to collect and track all information on all aspects of corporate relationships across the university by deploying a customer relationship management system, or CRM, for another acronym for you. Traditionally, people in my role have been connected to the foundation, connected to the fundraising aspect of corporate relations, where K-State is unique, but it's less unique every year, I think, in establishing a centralized Office of Corporate Engagement, where at the foundation, Mitzi's been collecting information and data on the corporate relationships in a system, the one system that really was developed for alumni relations or for one-on-one relationships. And when you begin looking at the complexity of what a corporate relationship can involve, a customer relationship management or CRM system is proving to be a much more effective tool for that. We're able to collect, let me back up, we have chosen Salesforce as the CRM system that we'll be utilizing at K-State. That system is in development, so what I'm talking about now is kind of the vision for what the system will be. We're beginning to utilize it in this way, but it will take time and resources to really develop that to where it really is working, firing on all cylinders, if you will. But we'll be able to collect data from various resources and house it in the Salesforce corporate engagement CRM system so that we have kind of one source of truth. And that will help us track some of those metrics that Mitzi mentioned and others, such as when a corporation comes to a campus to visit, we can track in our system who came from the corporation, what's their title, what's their contact information, who did they meet with on the campus, who are the faculty members that met with them, who are the staff members. And then in terms of research opportunities, we can collect information on proposals submitted and proposals won or proposals funded. We can find out we can track what departments those are in, so that we can find out what departments are really doing well in securing corporate-sponsored research agreements, and what can they teach other departments that might need some assistance in getting to that point. We'll be able to track employment data. Actually, Carrie's office, the Career and Employment Services, is already tracking that. But again, it's in their independent system, specific to what they need to do with their information, but it will be fed into the Office of Corporate Engagement system so that we can keep track of that. Same with alumni who are in the C-suite, licensing and tech transfer activities, and of course individual engagement can all be tracked there. And as I said, this data is already being captured across campus in a lot of different databases, and the goal or the vision is to have that being fed into the corporate engagement system so that at any point in time, you or your department head or your dean or anybody across this table might be able to contact me and say, what's our relationship with ConocoPhillips? What's going on right now? And so that we as a university we know what's going on, and we're not hitting them from a bunch of different directions without knowing what the others are doing across campus. So why is this important to K-State, and maybe more importantly, why is it important to you, and how will it impact your interactions with industry? And I want to talk briefly about a case study. You all probably remember Kodak, and they were in the mid-'70s the #1 retailer, the #1 source, 90% market share in photographic film. What you might not know is that in 1975 they developed the first digital camera. And it was they were so concerned about it eating into their core business that they did nothing with that product. And really couldn't fathom a world without traditional film. Well, you know the rest of the story. In 1990, that's when sales of film started to decline, and Kellogg initiated a 10-year strategic plan to get into digital photography, but it was too late. The train had already left the station, and in 2012, they filed for bankruptcy. So Kodak is not an isolated case. You can look at what's happening in the recording industry, in the newspaper and media industry, online retailing. Technology is disrupting business as usual, and it's going to continue to do so, and it's only going to accelerate. And this is not really new either. If you think about the railroad industry and what happened to the railroad industry when the interstate highways came into being, it's the same thing. This has been happening for a long time. And it's just this last fall, a company came to us. This is a company that the CEO is a K-State alum. I think he approached Kent Glasscock in the Institute for Commercialization, and Kent brought me into the conversation. And he was concerned about what kind of technology is going to disrupt his industry. He's already got, the company already has a significant relationship with a lab on campus, but it's with that lab. And he's recognizing that this disruptive technology may not come in that particular wheelhouse. So he's asking to expand the relationship. And as Mitzi said, when you've got a relationship, the lab director has a relationship, it can be kind of scary to let go of that and recognize that, yes, for the corporation, they may want to, it may be best for them to expand their relationship. But when we're talking about disruptive technology, that's really what's necessary, is to get beyond. So we're working with that, and I bring that up, and also, want to emphasize that this guy doesn't want to be the next Kodak. This company doesn't want to be the next Kodak case study. So that disruptive technology, as it continues to accelerate, I think we're going to see more and more corporations coming to universities, and K-State University in particular, to ask us for assistance with that. That's what this particular company did. They came to us because they wanted our help. This is a long-term process. It's not going to happen overnight. Some of you are going to have relationships with corporations that are going to come to us, or we may be reaching out to them. And the key there is that if we don't know you have relationships with them, it's going to be difficult to include you as part of the conversation. So as you can share, we'll share information with us, we're also better able to know who needs information shared in return. And I think this is a significant part of what we need to do as a university to expand corporate relations to a more holistic approach. And it's also very important to achieving our goals and visions and to becoming a top 50 public research university by 2025. So with that, Tony,
Okay,
I'll
great.
turn it over to you.
So I think we have about 10 minutes for questions of our panelists. Any questions from the audience? Okay, right here, sir. There's a microphone right there.
Yes, thank you. There is a microphone there.
Well, there's a lot of good information sharing, and I guess from my perspective, I'd like to have a better understanding of how we're doing dollar-wise in terms of the KSU Foundation. Got about $211 million or so last fiscal year, and how much of it is from industry, and we have a lot of grants and contracts, and how much of this is from industry. So where are we at now in a dollar sense?
Well, I can hit the foundation, the philanthropic side of that. About 28% of our 20 to 28% annually comes from corporations and foundations, Dr. Erickson. Some of that, I would say, is probably about half of that comes from proposals to corporations. A good deal of the funding that is counted as corporations and funding and foundations, I call Bob's Bar and Betty's Beauty Salon, which means an alum makes a gift to the university out of their private business, not out of their personal checkbook. So it's a little bit skewed, but at this point, I would say about half, so about 14% of that, 10 to 14% every year comes from what we would think of as a traditional company that the university would actually build a research relationship with.
Yeah, Larry, from the research side, I don't have the specific numbers, but I can testify that, our corporate negotiations have increased substantially. We spend a lot of time with engaging with companies we've not seen before. When I look at the overall sponsored project number, I mentioned our high was 152 million. We had a drop, when the federal funding picture in Washington, we dropped down to, I think it was 147. So that tells me we have a lot of work to do to balance and diversify our portfolio of research funding. We, in an Associate Dean's Council meeting, it was brought up, faculty get this. They understand that we need to look for alternative sources to fund our research programs, but we need to know how to conduct ourselves in that different arena. It's not the same as receiving a federal grant. So when I look at the research funding and I see we're so susceptible to the uncertainty in Washington, I can state we're not there yet, but we're seeing a lot of increased activities, the confidentiality agreements, material transfer agreements back and forth to analyze each of our respective compounds and formulas. We're seeing a lot increase. We're doing in excess of 400 of those types of agreements just on the ones we see on an annual basis. So I think it's increasing. We have a lot of work to do. But.
The good news, Larry, is in this effort to build the CRM that Richard talked about, is that we have begun to look very closely at a lot of data. Mary Lou and her team has helped us a great deal in this. And the good news is we have found that we have a lot of corporate relationships in the KSU Foundation that can be mined for research relationships and vice versa. We have research relationships that can be mined for philanthropic investment. So that data, looking at that data and really operating as one can really help us build strategies that will bring more resources to the university.
That data also includes information from Career and Employment Services. What's the trend in hiring from a given corporation, and are they hiring a whole lot and then not doing anything else? And that's another indicator where opportunities are ripe for expanding the relationship. And one of the objectives in my strategic plan is to determine what's our baseline. What is our baseline in exactly what you asked? And so hopefully by the end of 2015, we'll have that baseline, and then we'll be able to gauge too, how are we doing against that baseline? How are we increasing?
So just as a quick data point nationally, universities like Kansas State have typically about 5 to 10% of their sponsored research funding comes from industry. So if you're less than 5%, there's a reason for that. And if you're more than 10%, there's a reason for that. So most schools are in the 5 to 10 range that are land grants without a medical school. And the actual aggregated number is 6%, I think, from the most recent data from NSF. So if you have $100 million and you've got $6 million from industry, you're right at average. So
Thanks.
let me take a question in the back, and then we'll go here.
Just a quick follow-up question on the invention disclosure. Is there a standard form on the OSRP website or something?
So the question is there a standard invention disclosure form?
And the answer is yes. If you go to the Research Foundation website, we do have all of our disclosure forms there, and we have some of our other templates as well. So those resources are available.
Okay, great. We got a question here.
I'm thinking of the variety of types of interactions that take funding, external funding into consideration, starting with federal grants, contracting industry, grants to foundations, even consulting to the industry. So there's quite an array. And then I look at the offices in the university, and just today I have counted 5 university offices and 1 external, UIUP, right? So I have KC Foundation, the Research Foundation, the Institute for Commercialization, the Office for Corporate Engagement, and ORSP pre-award services. What is the point of contact? So
Yeah, so-
where this starts.
So the question is, so if I could, the question is, if you're a faculty member and you want to get engaged with industry to explore opportunities, who at the university should you start with?
That would be me. Office of Corporate Engagement, that I can serve as the portal, both from external and internal, particularly if you're not sure who to contact. However, feel free to go directly to any one of us on this panel and within the contact information. If you feel like yes, I know I need to talk to Paul, or I know I need to talk to Mitzi, you don't have to go through me. I'm not a bottleneck, but if you're not sure, then contact my office.
Okay.
Please don't take this as in a disrespectful manner, but is the story consistent? Because, if you go to different people, you get different stories, and I have been there. So, how does this work, guys? What is the point of contact? To get the real story.
I think you'll find you'll have different perspectives from each of us, but I think you'll have a consistent story based on what you need, specific to your interest. Because we only, I know at the foundation, we only exist to serve the university. That's our reason for being. So I think you'll get a different perspective from each of us, but you'll certainly get the guidance that you need that will help you.
Yeah, and with our office, a lot of times that initial engagement, to open and freely exchange information, they're going to want a confidentiality agreement. We are your first contact for that, and a lot of, I call that pre-engagement type activities. You're just, trying to get to know each other, should we date or not? And we kind of took that context with this boot camp, is trying to, I'm invited to the dance, but, I don't have a date. But with that, it depends on where you're at in that contact. If you're just initially making contact, we're going to talk to you about those initial vehicles that will be used to facilitate the engagement. If you're ready to develop a cost plan, for your activity, you're past that stage, you're going to contact us.
So
as
I
well.
think maybe a takeaway from this is, it would be good to have a simple contact sheet with what the topic is, and then who's the point of contact. Certainly, Richard is the overall, but, things like who does CDAs or invention disclosures or sponsored research or proposal development, or actually, look at this, maybe it's already in your materials, but maybe that's a takeaway for you all.
Thanks.
Okay, we're running out of time, but any more questions? Any more questions? Okay, well, please join me in thanking today's panel.
Thank you very much for being here. I hope you'll take part in our future sessions. In fact, the one starting at 2:30 today is in this room, and the Alumni Center staff need to turn the room for that. It has become a no loitering zone. There's plenty of opportunity to loiter and talk and network out the doors there, but if you would exit, please, as quickly and as safely as you can, then that will help us get ready for the next session. Thank you.